because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are. And we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a movie podcast where we explore philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today something happened to us on the way to our secret Mount Rushmore hideaway. We were mistaken for a made-up spy. But luckily, we got the microfilm and saw that on it was an urgent message to invite Adam Kane on the podcast to talk about Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. So here we are. Welcome back, Adam.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about this movie. I think there are a lot of similarities between this movie and the last movie we talked about, Mission Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of shared DNA there.
Spies.
Spy thrillers.
Spy thrillers. I want to start with, we always start here. If it's a movie we assume most people have seen, then, we just jump into it. If it's a movie guessing a lot of people haven't seen, then I start with the spoiler-free pitch. But I'm assuming this movie's been out for more than 50 years. I think people have had their shot at seeing it. So we're just going to jump into it. But Adam, I wanted to start with, what's your relationship to Hitchcock in particular in this film?
So I think the first Hitchcock movie I saw was Rear Window at some point in high school. And then, Rear Window, which is in a lot of ways kind of the opposite of North by Northwest. But then, you kind of pick and choose all of the ones that people tell you are the classics. And I just think from a big picture standpoint, Hitchcock is kind of the master of the cinematic version of the vacation read in a lot of ways, where it's just like a really, really great, tightly plotted story that is, kind of pure entertainment, and isn't really trying to do anything other than that.
Yeah, pulp. It's
really
pulp.
Cool. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
totally. And I think the notion of vacation read is perfect. Yeah, you pick it up, you read it, and you put it down, and you just move on to the next one.
You read it so fast. And then when you try to remember, why were they who knows? Don't think about it too hard.
I read the Da Vinci Code on vacation. That was a vacation read for me.
That's a good vacation read.
Actually, No Country for Old Men was a vacation read for me too.
Not as good of a vacation read.
To be fair, it's very suspenseful. It has all the exciting bits that are in the movie and all that. So Adam, North by Northwest. Is this?
Yeah.
Let's just start here. We always end with this, but how does it rank for you among Hitchcock films?
So this is my favorite Hitchcock movie, and it's probably one of my favorite overall movies. I just think this is like maximalist Hitchcock, where he, a lot of his earlier films, especially like most movies sort of pre 1950, are in studios, and everything is very, very controlled and contained. And this movie, Hitchcock is filming tracking shots on Madison Avenue sidewalks, and he's using Mount Rushmore both as an actual location, and then also building a Mount Rushmore set, which is insane. Just it's a romp in every way possible. Just really exciting, incredible action, without losing sort of that Hitchcockian menace. So it's a mystery that really sustains the movie, while also being just like a thrilling, fun adventure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this movie is really fun. It is almost, I would say, is it the most fun Hitchcock film? There's a lot of Hitchcock films I have not seen. He's made many films. But of the big maybe 5 or 6, it's got to be one of the most fun. It may be even the most
really
fun. From cover to cover. And part of that is, I think, that first scene, basically first act, really. But that first scene when Thornhill is brought into the house under the mistaken identity as a spy, and as an audience member, you were just hopelessly confused because you've seen him as a madman guy, as an ad guy.
Yep.
But then you're like, but maybe that's all ruse. Maybe he's just a spy, and he's playing this game, or else maybe what's gone wrong? Something deeply, has gone deeply wrong here. It's very audacious to put the audience in that perspective at the beginning of your movie, and basically just lead the audience to think, did not know what's going on.
Yeah. So you were thinking like maybe he is Kaplan, like in that first when he's in the house.
I think the first time you see the movie,
Yeah.
I think you don't know. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can't remember like how I felt the very first time I saw it. The reason I thought about it and was I had read that they had an initial, so the titles, the Saul Bass titles were so beautiful. They had this initial idea that they were going to do like a montage of him being a madman, like his life as an ad man, and then for the opening sequence, and then they like ran out of money and time, and even though like Cary Grant offered to do it for free, they were just like, screw it. So that's why they ended up doing the city
the titles,
grid,
which are great,
and then scenes of just New York life, which are great. But that if you had all that scene of him being an ad man, I feel like that would take away from this initial confusion of like, well, maybe he is a spy. I mean, what is happening?
To admit something, maybe this is embarrassing to admit, but I had seen this film 2 times before. The first time I remember being very confused. And I remember being confused the second time because I had forgotten what happened. And I was just like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Is he a spy? What? Am I misremembering? I had this like moment of self-doubt the second time. I remembered it all in the third time, but like, I think it's set up to keep you in the dark. And I think so much so that Hitchcock adds that scene in between the first and second act, which is like this interstitial thing where like we cut now to the professor and the spy agency, and they're explaining basically to the audience what's going on. And I actually think that was probably included because audiences were like, what the hell is happening? You know, I mean, you must have just assumed the audience would be so confused that we can't keep them in confusion for this long. That said, I think it would have been even more wild. Like, you don't need that scene. Like, today's audience, you do not need that scene. Like, you know, the audience will get it and will hold on, for the ride. But I think maybe they felt they had to give the audience something to keep them from being confused.
I think it's, if you don't have that scene, you kind of go 2/3 of the movie without any real sort of understanding of what's going on. And it introduces you to sort of this bigger game at play, that scene, which I think is Hitchcock's way of kind of doing this sort of background and contextualizing that you need, but in a little bit more of a clever way. There's a very similar scene at the very end of Psycho, which I think is not as successful. But it's because you're kind of at the end of the movie and it's a guy saying like, okay, everything you just saw, here's what it all means.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's like, okay, let's give you 20 minutes and then we'll kind of clue you in. The other thing I like about that scene is that it sort of changes how we're watching the movie. Like we're totally along for the ride with Cary Grant in that first act. And then in the second act, we, the audience, know way more than he does.
Yeah.
And it gives those scenes a slightly different tone.
I think I totally agree. And I mean, he reintroduces immediately after that scene another element of confusion in the form of Eva Marie Saint's character, Eve Kendall, who is like blatantly hitting on Thornhill, but for no reason, for no reason. That we can tell. Yeah, except that maybe she's actually attracted to him. Where it's like unclear what's going on here. You know something's going on, but you don't know what it is. So again, the confusion is reintroduced. So maybe the thought is, I'm going to show you a little bit, but then I'm going to still withhold some stuff to keep you 20% confused. Just like Cary Grant, you're always a little bit off, not sure what the hell's going on.
Do you think, though, what it does do is like help set up some stakes, not really giving any true specifics because we don't understand like what government agency are, what secrets, who's the enemy. It doesn't really matter who's spying on who for like why they're spying on him. But like you do understand they have no compunction whatsoever about letting this guy die. And so too, when you find out that Eve is a double agent, that they similarly probably won't value her life whatsoever.
Yeah.
But you already know that they want to kill him. Because they've basically already attempted to murder him by basically getting him drunk and then driving him off a cliff.
But that wasn't the professor. Those were.
Oh, you mean the professor? I mean the good guys.
I mean the good guys. I mean the stakes are that like that Thornhill Thornhill or is it Thorndike?
Thornhill, yeah.
Thank
Thornhill.
you. Thornhill is completely on his own in this endeavor
Mhm.
because the American agency is not coming to his aid. They're like, great, let him die.
Yeah.
That's great for us.
But-
But could not care less. And then you have that knowledge going forward. And so when you find out that Eve is a double agent, and that the professor is sending her off on this mission, you feel extra concerned for her and her safety because they don't care about her safety, probably.
I see.
Yep.
That's what I mean.
I
Like
see.
they've got this other mission that does not value the human beings that are like working in
I
the
see.
name of
yeah.
that mission.
So it's the ultimate thing then to make you feel more on Cary Grant's side when he ultimately decides to save her.
I'm wondering if that does help because I had a moment where I was like, she's a badass spy doing her job. Like, sorry that you feel mad that she flirted with you. You know, like.
Yeah.
Just let her do her job. But you do worry when the professor says like she has to go, you know, that they don't have her best interest at heart.
Yeah, I see.
They're not going to go save her.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, in the scene, we're jumping around a lot here, but in the
Sure.
scene where they're in the woods
Yeah.
and he does not carry Grant out. Right?
Yes.
So like in a way they already show that they are ruthless pragmatists about things. But you're right that I mean, well, here's the other thing. Just on this point, I think this is actually an interesting point. The scene where, again, this interstitial scene we're talking about is the scene where they are in DC and the spies are all talking and they're like, yeah, well, let's let this guy take the fall as George Kaplan, who we just made up. But then we see that the professor's actually been shadowing Thornhill and is watching, or right, because he's at the auction. Right, he's keeping his eye out on him. I mean, maybe he's not shadowing him. Maybe he's there to shadow the other guy, but he's at least
Maybe he's
looking out.
He's keeping his eye on the microfilm.
Exactly, but he's looking out for. He goes and looks out for Thornhill.
Yeah,
and so at that point, you might think that's actually incongruous with what they said before. Right? They said before they don't care about this guy. Let him take the fall. And then there he goes and like rescues him. Now maybe he rescues him just so that he can use him to be George Kaplan. Right. So, but anyway, it's very confusing.
I think the professor's there at the auction scene because he recognizes that Thornhill could be useful to them in maintaining Eve's cover.
Yeah, and
I think all of this discussion really kind of illuminates how wild the plotting is in this movie.
Yeah,
and how it actually none of it actually matters all that much. Like you're kind of you're getting people from point to point. You're moving kind of from awesome location to awesome location. It's all really, really exciting, edge of your seat stuff. That if you start to poke holes too much in like individual plot moments, it all kind of unravels a little bit. And I think, going back to Alfred Hitchcock, I think he is also kind of the master of. He was kind of the master of. We're in the moment.
Yeah.
This all tracks totally, but like you said earlier, if you try to think about it after the fact, once you're kind of out of that moment, it holds up less well.
I think that's right. I mean, the beauty and magic of film is that it can put you in a moment and experience where everything feels real, and yet when you step out of that moment, everything feels unreal because there's all these questions you have, and nothing that made sense. And you could tell they're acting, blah blah blah. Like if you guys ever walked in on a movie. I don't know if you feel this way, but when I walk in on a movie, I see the artifice of the film way more than when I'm seated and I go through the credits and I get into the flow of the movie. And it's the same thing. If like if we were to give you the plot summary, you the audience, the plot summary of this movie, we would, at every point we'd be like, "What? Why doesn't make any sense?" But the beauty of the film is that you're caught up in everything that's happening and you're not asking those questions, and you realize when you're in the moment of the film how silly it would be to ask those questions because it would take you out of enjoying the grandeur of what's happening. I mean, I think the clearest case of this, there's a lot of them in this film, but the clearest case, the most explicit, and if there's any, I think maybe potentially the most audacious moment in this film is a moment when Eve sends George / Roger to the middle of nowhere. She says, okay, you're going to meet the real George. You're going to meet him in the middle of nowhere. And so he takes a bus to Indiana or something, right?
Yeah.
And he's in the middle, he just gets off the bus. He's in the middle of nowhere. It's like two dirt roads intersecting amongst a lot of crops. And he looks around and Hitchcock, he was like a sly prankster because he must have had so much fun editing this sequence and watching it with an audience where they're confused, just like the character.
Yeah. And he takes his time.
Takes so long to have anything happen. Some guy, like a car, starts driving in. And he's like, oh, is that okay? Here he is.
No.
The guy gets out of the car. He's wearing a suit. Does he have a briefcase? I don't know. But he's got a suit and a hat on. And they look at each other. Is anything going to happen? Nope. He's just waiting for the bus. Okay. So then the bus comes and he gets on the bus. And then he's just sitting there. And then there's a plane flying around. And then suddenly the plane's coming at him and he's being attacked by a plane. At any point in this, you're like, why would this be what they would choose to do? Like, if you were a bad guy, you'd be like, all right, we got to take this guy out. Let's get a plane, put him in the middle of nowhere. We'll have a plane, like, shoot him down. Doesn't make any sense. It's so inefficient. There's no way you would know if he's actually dead. Like, it's so expensive. It's like you would never do that. And yet it's like, that's the iconic scene in this movie. That's like that's like the picture on the poster and everything is him being chased by the plane. So, I think if anything, it just is like a reminder that in film, don't ask those type of questions. Like, strap in and let's go.
Yeah. I mean, he's totally, like you said, going for the feeling there, and you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. It's such an exciting sequence, and it has been duplicated and copied, like kind of shot for shot. They started doing it almost immediately in other movies, including one of the early Sean Connery James Bond movies. There's basically the same scene, but it's with a helicopter. You see it in TV, and it's just nonstop. To the point where people who have never seen this movie know that scene and know, can pick up the references. You can, I think, invent a plot reason for why that happens. I think there's a way to kind of say, well, it must be that Van Damme wants to show the government that, like, he can orchestrate this thing and make their agent look foolish or whatever. But it's just exciting. Like, it's just a very cool action sequence.
Yeah, and I think if anything, what it highlights is a really crucial difference between film as a narrative medium and literature. So I think that sequence makes absolutely no sense if it was written on the page.
Right.
And unless you told them this backstory like you're suggesting, Adam. But without that backstory, you can't get into the sequence in the same way to forget all those questions. And if the novel had just basically described this, and then it was never explained, you would be like, well, that was bad because that was a crazy thing that happened that made no sense. But here, I think it sort of works brilliantly, partly because it creates iconography, right? And we're in the realm of iconography, not the realm of ultimately of plot or something like that. Like, this is about creating an image and creating creating suspense and emotion. And you can do that in film. And I think this film is what, 57, 59? What is this?
59.
59. Yeah, Vertigo is 57, I believe. Or Vertigo is the year before, maybe. But Hitchcock is like playing with the medium in interesting ways. And I think that this is a perfect example of trying something out that I think filmmakers I just think, it's audacious, because I think people at this point in the history of film, everyone is trying to figure out how to communicate things explicitly to the audience. And so they're trying to figure out how do you show what's going on in somebody's mind, right? Like, so you do it by being like, look, shot at their face, and then you put a shot on the object they're looking at to show, they're looking at that object, right? And so it's all trying to make things explicit through imagery.
Do a cool whisper voiceover like in Dune.
Or voiceover. or just right, or like it, like literally in these old silent films, they'll just have title cards explaining stuff
Yeah.
to you because
Mhm.
it, and when you watch these films, I've been watching a bunch of them recently. They're oftentimes they don't work because there'll be something you've realized later what they were trying to do and it just fails. Like they're trying to like highlight this is what's going on, and you can't pick up on it because they don't have the cuts yet. They don't
Right.
have the staging. They haven't figured that out yet. And I think what Hitchcock is doing here is like transcending that almost. He doesn't
Mhm.
need you to know what the hell's going on. He just wants to evoke an experience and a
Mhm.
mood. And
Yep.
the mood is confusion, right? The
Yep.
mood is mystery and suspense. And you do that not by being explicit, and you do it by utilizing the audience's expectations to desire an answer, right? That they've come to
Withholding
think,
that
and you just
information.
withhold it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And then bowl
Yeah.
them over with spectacle.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
I'm certainly not a Hitchcock expert, nor have I watched all the movies. But when I think about Hitchcock, I often think about the stuff that comes a little bit earlier, and the like he's a master of like a thrilling scene, right? I think about Rear Window and the final climax where he's being in the dark in a wheelchair, approached by the possible murderer, and he
Mhm.
just has a flash bulb, right? That's
Mhm.
all he has. And like that feeling of like being in the darkness and trapped is something that I think Hitchcock did so well in so many of his movies. I mean, he's like the master of the macabre, and that's what I often think about. But this is like the reverse visually,
interesting,
right? Like
yeah.
it's wide open, it's full color, it's middle of the day. He's trapped only in as much as that he's in the middle of freaking nowhere, but he can run.
But he can't outrun a
Mhm.
plane.
He can't outrun a plane.
Yeah.
But like what's I think we naturally have a fear response about being in the dark and about,
Mhm.
and perhaps not able to move. We don't necessarily have a fear response about wide open spaces, except for
Mhm.
that the sort of amazing spectacle of seeing a plane dive through in a way that you can only really get that feeling from film.
Yeah.
I think that's what it seems like. It's something newer that Hitchcock is trying at this
Totally.
point.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's one of the coolest sequences. And I think it's made all the cooler by the fact that it's inexplicable and that it comes in the middle of a film that is set. Yeah, I mean, it's set in New York, and then Chicago's the urban locations, and then suddenly we shift to this desolate space, and the contrast is so severe. And also, I mean, Cary Grant is dressed in this, ad man suit.
Yeah.
Like he's so out of place.
I
And
didn't know that suit was such a big deal. Apparently that suit's a big deal. People are
Yeah.
really obsessed with the suit.
yeah, it was
I mean, it's a nice suit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the next time I'll ever wear a suit, but I have a gray suit that
There you go.
is not nearly as nice as that, but
It's your
good to
Cary
have a gray
Grant
suit.
suit.
I also want to think about so apparently Hitchcock and his screenwriter Ernest Lehman were opposed to thinking about this film symbolically, whereas Hitchcock, because this was a move away, I guess his move away from symbolism momentarily, whereas previous films had really embraced certain symbolic aspects, especially Freudian and psychoanalytic symbolism. But I do think there is something that he's playing with here that unifies this thematically, at least with other films of his of the time, namely identity, right? So this is a film about mistaken identity. And in the film previous, Vertigo, the mistaken identity is basically it's inverted, right? It's he mistakes someone else for someone, right? And here he is the one who's mistaken. So they're almost like mirror images of each
Mhm.
other. But I was thinking like if the thrill, because I think that's the word I think to use with Hitchcock, is it's always about the thrill of something. If the thrill of Vertigo is the discovery that somebody who like might be dead actually is alive, right? Or
Mhm.
that there's some conspiracy or something, or that maybe they're a ghost or something like that. I think the thrill of the mistaken identity here is something like the opportunity that you have to be someone else.
Mm.
Because I think it's interesting that Thornhill takes on the George Kaplan persona so willingly. I mean, they set it up like it's his only way to clear his name, but he's pretty into the George Kaplan. He like very quickly is George Kaplan, right?
Yeah.
He like goes to the hotel and he's calling down like, I'm George Kaplan, and just, he plays that role so willingly. And then by the time the professor's like, okay, we need you to be George Kaplan, he's like, yeah, I've already been George Kaplan for a while. I think I could do this. Like
he also likes the spy stuff.
Yeah, he's into it.
He's like looking for the impressions when she writes a note on the notepad, like in Big Lebowski.
Yeah, like in Big Lebowski. Yeah.
Well, and he's like, in the sort of the end of the New York sequence before the UN scene where he's in Kaplan's hotel room, he's like trying on being Kaplan. He's like, okay, this feels okay. I'm gonna keep doing this. Yeah, he sort of eases into it almost. And you're going back to what you were talking about, Vertigo is all about forcing a person to take on a persona, and North by Northwest is all about a person choosing to take on a persona. Which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think I don't know if this is reaching, but I kind of feel like one of the things we are drawn to about narrative in general is the desire to play out alternative lives, to live in somebody else's shoes, to make choices that are different from our own and just kind of experience that. I mean, at least it's what always drew me to role-playing games, because that's kind of a way of doing that is to be like, well, I'm this kind of boring introvert. Maybe I could pretend to be an exciting extrovert. And what would that be like? And just do that for a bit, and then you go back to your life. And it's a way of trying out alternative possibilities. And narrative, I think, are ways of doing that. They're like, we try on these different personas. And so in that way, the film is self-reflexive, right? It allows the audience to, first of all, identify with Thornhill, not only because he's your viewpoint character and you don't know anything, just like he doesn't know anything at the beginning of the movie, but also to, like Thornhill's trying on the George Kaplan persona, try on the Thornhill / George Kaplan persona. And I think there is a certain degree of, white man reflexive engagement here with the character, because I think Cary Grant embodied a certain ideal of white male masculinity in the 50s and 40s, 50s, and 60s. And probably was, I imagine, and Laura, you can correct me here, but I imagine he was one of the guys that men wanted to be and women wanted to be with, like that kind of famous line people would say, right? And so if he's your stand-in, then the male audience members are like, great, this is like, I get to pretend to be Cary Grant for a bit. And one of the interesting wish fulfillment moments of the film, where I think this really does feel like it's Hitchcock is like playing this out, is the train scene when he meets Eve for the first time. I mean, I think there's a certain male fantasy of just being like, I'm so attractive that a woman will see me and then
and proposition me
and lie to the police to help me. So she'll like put everything on the line.
She wants to be with me so bad. Yeah. She knows I'm a murderer, and she's like, needs a nice face.
Right? That's like a crazy wish fulfillment thing. And of course that's subverted, right? Because I think Hitchcock is also poking fun at this character. It's subverted at, when we realize, oh, okay, that was all a ruse. But, she does get with him in the end, so it all comes back around. But I do think there's something going on there, right? About trying on personas and about that being part of the aspect of film engagement that I think Hitchcock is very interested in.
I know, I look vaguely familiar.
Yes.
You feel you've seen me somewhere before.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how I have that effect on people. It's something about my face.
It's a nice face.
You think so?
I wouldn't say it if I didn't.
Oh, you're that type.
What type?
Honest.
Not really.
As the audience is watching this movie, especially upon rewatch, there is this, we are in Cary Grant's viewpoint, and this woman that has just been introduced to the film says, I know that you are wanted for murder. It's clear to us as an audience, like this woman is not just a stranger on a train. And yet him as a character, like he hasn't fully figured out how to be a spy yet. or he's just so attracted to her he doesn't care. That's I think, again, going back to that scene with the professor at the very beginning, like because we know that there's more afoot here, we're able to kind of look at that scene from a couple different perspectives.
Yeah, it's true. We do know there's a double agent, right? We know they have a double agent embedded.
Mhm.
And so initially, yeah. But I also think like first time watch, I think I would not have picked, I did not, and I would not have picked up on that on the first time.
You just
I-
thought she was like really horny for Cary Grant.
I think there's
I
something.
mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're suspicious. You're like, something's going on here, but like, you're not thinking double agent. This time around, I was like, oh yeah, that connection was very clear to me. They set up,
Mhm.
we got a double agent, we can't compromise them. And then she's acting all strange. You think, okay, she's probably like the double agent,
Yeah.
right? She's helping him. But you don't know why she's helping him. That's the interesting thing that isn't revealed yet, right? She could be helping him in her role for the U.S. government, right? You don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's, I don't know. Hitchcock, I think everything I know about Hitchcock is that, I think he was a man's man in this regard. I think he liked his ladies, and his films clearly have a male gaze to them. So that said, he's not, we should talk about Eve a little bit. He gives Eve and his female characters agency, and he allows them opportunity to sort of be equals to their, or almost equals to their male counterparts. So although there's a male gaze, I don't think he's disparaging or anything towards his female characters.
Yeah, I think so. I really like the Eve character.
Yeah.
She's really capable. She's been doing this job for a long time, and we don't know how long, but like that's a tough life living a double agent. We watch Kaplan / Roger / whatever not be so good at it. He's finding his way into the role, but it's not easy. And she's so self-assured and confident, and I like the story that she tells where she fell in love with this guy, Van Damme. She found out he's kind of a bad dude, and she was just like, okay, yeah, like I'll be an agent, I'll be a spy. Like she was just a little lost, and she had this skill set, and she had the courage, and I think she's a really cool character, and I really like her seduction of Cary Grant. It's too easy. He's big dumb, but it's yeah. But I think it's like
Also, just like how they had to write and film those seduction scenes in 1959.
Yes.
Very, very funny now. Like it's, I mean, the scene works and you're on board with it, but then like, oh, they have to be standing up because you can't show two people sitting on a bed, and you can't say making love, and
you have to say talk about love. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like all of that stuff is certainly not intentional, but I do think kind of adds to the scene.
Yeah, when I think back, when I watch movies from this era, I just think like that's how people were. I just thought that's how you flirted back then, right? Am I wrong about this? Do we have any people who knew what it was like to flirt in 1959? Because
do you think it was just everybody was just like going at it obliquely?
Well, first,
is that
yes,
what you mean?
and in a mid-Atlantic accent.
Yes.
Just lighting each other's cigarettes.
Yeah.
Like, real sexy like.
I don't know. I believe it. I'm just like, yeah, this is effectively a documentary of life in 1959. As far as I'm concerned, everything looked like it was in Technicolor, and everyone was super tan. Right, Cary Grant is mega tan.
He's
this.
really tan in
Yeah.
this. I was almost distracted.
Like alarmingly tan.
Yeah.
But the Technicolor is like not helping, I think, in that. I think
it's
like
making it a little orangey.
real saturated. It's like you might dial back that saturation, you'd have a normal skin tone. But
have you? I don't know if you've read this trivia that Jimmy Stewart was very excited about this script.
Okay.
And Hitchcock wanted Cary Grant because Cary Grant is more handsome than Jimmy Stewart, and so had to wait to start filming this movie until Jimmy Stewart like signed on to some other movie.
Oh wow.
And in the last few weeks, watching Vertigo and watching Rear Window again, like Cary Grant is much more handsome than Jimmy Stewart. This movie would not work with Jimmy Stewart, I don't think. I think you kind of need the sort of suave, self-assured, non-regional dialect that you get from Cary Grant.
Yeah. There's something gawky about Jimmy Stewart's height too that I feel like somehow like wouldn't translate well. And the other thing that I had read is that poor Jimmy Stewart. I guess like Hitchcock, the thing that I had read, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, is that he was concerned that Jimmy Stewart was too old for this role because he blamed his advancing age for the non-success of Vertigo the year prior, which is funny because he hires Cary Grant, who's like, I mean, maybe this is a good time to talk about how old is this character supposed to be? Because like he looks old and he's supposed to be, and he acts 30s? What are we thinking here? He said 2 marriages so
he
far.
said 2 marriages.
But also people are getting married at like 16 at this time.
So Cary Grant was, I think, 50. He's in his mid-50s.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that's pretty old. He actually looks pretty good for mid-50s.
He looks great.
Yeah.
He looks great. I'm not saying he doesn't look great. He looks great. But when he's talking to Mother, you're like, wait.
Yeah. He's
how
crashing.
old is
He's
this
crashing
guy?
with his mom at 55.
Yeah.
His mother, who looks the same age as him.
All right, well, let's ask this question. Trivia. How much older is the actress? Just guess, unless you looked this up already.
I looked it up a long time ago and don't remember. My guess is she is 7 years older than he is.
Laura, what's your guess?
I'll go a little under 5.
Yeah, it's 7. 7 years.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
7 years older
Good
than
memory.
him. Which is, I don't know, like, why you do that, but again, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of just like, yeah, you're suspending a lot of disbelief in this movie, so that's fine, right?
I think
he's supposed to be playing like late 30s, right?
Yeah, that's my guess. Is that his character is supposed to be 40-ish.
Yeah.
And Eve says that she is 26.
Yeah.
In that opening scene, interestingly, played by a 34-year-old actress. Both actors playing different ages and older than their characters, which is, I think, unusual.
Yeah, I always just feel like women from that period of time look like a 26-year-old woman in the 50s would like look older to me just because they look more polished and together. So I sort of like bought her as a 26-year-old because I was just like, I'm never gonna look back. I don't even know how to make your hair do the wavy thing. I
was gonna say,
she looks like a grown ass lady to
hair
me.
Product. Yeah.
It's certain the way they comport themselves too, you know, and they're taught to be ladies, right? And now today, like they were taught to be gentlemen. It was
I don't
just
even know about that.
It was just thing that like you hold yourself in a certain way, right? And you speak in a certain way, and that I think makes you seem old. It just makes you seem older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
mature. I think the word I'd be looking for is
mature.
I want you to do a favor for me. A big, big favor.
Name it.
I want you to leave right now. Stay far away from me and don't come near me again. We're not going to get involved. Last night was last night, and that's all there was. And that's all there is. There isn't going to be anything more between us. So please, goodbye, good luck, no conversation, just leave.
Right away?
Yes.
How self-aware, how subversive do we think the choices are that Cary Grant is making or the writers are making in the character of Roger Thornhill? Like, do you think that, I'm thinking of like when we watch Nicolas Cage and Wicker Man, like sort of like be a fragile white man on the verge of a breakdown because he's not in control of everything at once. Like, is this, you know, are we meant to think like when we're watching Roger be a complete ass to Eve just because she is with somebody else, you know, and he's acting like a big baby about it. You know, you flirted with me, but maybe you don't like me, and now I'm gonna call you a hussy and like stomp around. Like, do you think like we're meant to be on his side with that, or are we meant to acknowledge that he's a complete ass? I don't know how much I'm bringing like a 2020 perspective to this character, or how much credit I'm giving to Cary Grant for poking fun at fragile masculinity.
I was thinking about that when we were the last time I watched this movie, and there's not a lot like the dialogue is very quippy, but there's not a lot of sort of ironic detachment, especially from his character. Like, it all feels really surface level, and he's just kind of reacting to the most recent information that he is getting. So my interpretation is that there's not any subtext, at least in, you know, when he comes back from the cornfield scene. I think as he gets more information, that shifts a little bit. But that scene in the hotel room is and in the hotel lobby, like, I don't know, those are pretty rough in 2022. Those read, I think, a little differently.
Yeah. I mean, the first scene, his introduction, I remember being like, oh God, are we going to be with this guy the whole movie? This guy sucks. Like,
He's
you know,
cut down to size pretty quickly.
he's cut down to size
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, of course. Like that first act is just him, you know, everybody's rolling their eyes at him. Mother doesn't believe him. But, you know, he's like a bit of a blowhard. And, and you're right. He totally gets cut down to size. But I wondered how much, like, that's a really big difference. But you know, if this is the original James Bond movie, James Bond is always cool, calm, and
James Bond-
collected, and like the peak of cool masculinity.
James Bond is
right?
never in the situation that Roger Thornhill is in. No. But
Because women do want to sleep with him.
yes,
Full
but
stop.
to split the difference between between the thoughts you guys had, I don't think there's really much in Cary Grant's performance to suggest that he is aware that his character is meant to be laughed at times. But I do think that Hitchcock probably intended some degree of us to laugh at him, basically, to find his bluster funny and not merely, you know, sympathetic. But I think that that's doubly subversive on Hitchcock's part, because I think Hitchcock is also thinking that the male audience members are going to identify with this character. And so when the character has a woman fall in love with him after 5 seconds, they're going to go, yeah, that could happen. That could happen to me too. And then that'd be undercut. And so then have their
And
own
the audience be like, wait,
exactly.
what?
Then their own expectations and everything are undercut. I that's my thought, is that I think he's you know, he's playing with the archetype of a character played by Cary Grant.
Mhm.
And but of course he uses Cary Grant, but I don't think Cary Grant's necessarily in on that joke.
Right. Yeah.
I think Cary Grant was aware of his sort of soft comedy abilities. Like he knew how to be funny on screen, but I don't know that, I think sort of beyond that, I don't know that there's a ton of awareness in the performance. I think he was willing to not always look cool because he knew that he was Cary Grant. You know?
Right. No, I mean, he knows how to be silly. I mean, like a, you know, like a bringing up baby kind of Cary Grant.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, when he plays drunk and he's in the, you know, and that, and he's making a phone call to mother, you know, that kind of thing, I think is Cary Grant being like, I'm in comedy mode.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's take a specific scene, which is when he confronts Eve in the hotel room.
Yeah.
And the question is that, does Cary Grant know that what he's doing there is intended to be a critique of, or is a critique of, intended or not, of fragile masculinity? And I think the answer is no. But I think, you know, I think what Cary Grant presumably is doing, and the script probably also was probably doing, was like, this is how a dude would react in 1959 if this happened to him. He'd be like, come here, lady, slap her around a bit, and then he would smoke a cigar. I'd be like, all right, Dane.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's just sadly the world that we lived in. But I think that Hitchcock, though, what's subversive is that he's taking that trope, and by making this character basically constantly be 10 steps behind everything that's happening, show that this guy's actually kind of dumb.
Yeah.
You know, like he saves the day in the end, but
his heroism also comes, I mean, saving the day also comes from like this chauvinistic instinct where he's like, what? Like, you are making this lady sleep with somebody for you to get your secrets? Like, he says something that to the professor, like, if you're, you know, not good enough at your job, that you have to make this woman bed down with somebody. I think he says some phrase like that, which, you know, like, pause. She's a grown lady. She was already in a relationship. Right. She made this choice.
Well, we don't know if they threatened her. They could have threatened her with, like,
she doesn't make it sound like that. She makes it sound like they had approached her and she decided, hey, I'll be a spy. Yeah. Like, you know, like he's making a lot of assumptions about her, an inclination to do this work, about her like agency here, you know, her consent in this. Like, he's just like, you know, she is a damsel
wants to have sex
to be
with me,
saved.
not that
exactly
effeminate,
exactly.
You know, more. Yeah.
We flirted once on a train. Now she is mine. Problem solved. I will save her from her scenario that she's in right now. Now, Hitchcock bails him out because
Yeah.
then turns out like she was going to get thrown out of a plane. So
Yeah.
like he did definitely save her, but all by accident, really.
Yeah.
Mhm.
From his own chauvinistic inclinations.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's not is it chauvinistic or is it that he likes her and wants to be with her?
Okay. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah. I mean, he might have gone there to be like, don't go with him, come with me. You love me, right? And then she could choose. Or he might have gone there to be like King Kong and like take her away. I don't know. So let's talk about some other stuff that doesn't make any sense about this movie. So the MacGuffins, there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
Adam, what are the 2 MacGuffins?
So the MacGuffin for most of the movie is this fictional spy, Agent Kaplan, and then the last act of the movie, it's this microfilm. And I love the microfilm as a MacGuffin because you know nothing about it other than Van Damme has it. The professor doesn't want him to have it.
Yeah.
And that's literally all you know about it, and it's all you need to know about it. And it's like the perfect device for propelling the action at the end of this movie.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it comes in a monkey statue.
Right.
Is that right? Is it? And it like how did they get it open? I can't remember. Did they break it? The monkey statue, just like crack it open?
Yeah, they break it open at some point, or it's
I
like
think it
thrown
comes
or
broken
falls,
like
yeah.
in pursuit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love a good spy involving art though.
Mm-hmm.
And a good art auction. Great art auction scene.
That was a good scene.
Yeah.
Number 110 in the catalog. A Louis XV carved and gilded lit de repos. Would somebody start the bidding at $750, please?
How do we know it's not a fake? It looks like a fake.
Well, one thing we know, you're no fake. You're a genuine idiot.
Thank you.
I wonder if I could respectfully ask the gentleman to get into the spirit of the proceedings here.
All right, I'll start it at 8.
800. Thank you. 900. 1,000 is bid. Go 12.
11.
11 is bid. Thank you. Go 12. I have 11. Go 12. Who'll say 12? 11 once. Who'll say 12? 11 twice. 12. Thank you. 12 is bid. I have 12. Go 13. Who'll say 13?
$13.
You mean 1,300, sir?
No, I mean $13. That's more than it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, any spy movie, you got to have the MacGuff. And I think, didn't Hitchcock invent the term MacGuffin? Isn't that his term?
I think so, yeah. I could be wrong.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I read something quickly about it, but he uses like an old Scottish story that talks about a MacGuffin and then
Okay.
has like used that.
It sounds like it's like a character of a Shakespeare play. Honestly.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, just because it's Mac.
Yeah.
Macduff.
Okay, so he, in a
MacGuffin.
1966 interview with Francois Truffaut, said, it might be a Scottish name taken from a story about 2 men in a train. One man says, "What's that package up there in the baggage rack?" And the other answered, "Oh, that's a MacGuffin." The first one asks, "What's a MacGuffin?" Well, the other man says, "It's an apparatus for trapping lions in the Scottish Highlands." The first man says, "But there are no lions in the Scottish Highlands." And the other one answers, "Well, then that's no MacGuffin." And I guess that's,
Great.
yeah. But I think Hitchcock has appropriated that joke term in his films.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, that tells us exactly the same thing about like don't ask stupid questions. That's basically the like stop asking stupid questions. End of the. Like that's Hitchcock's answer to us being
There
like,
are
what about
lions-
this plane thing? And
There
what
are
about
lines in the Scottish Highlands if he says so, and if you see it on screen, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have a favorite MacGuffin from other movies?
That's a good question. I've not thought about it, Laura.
No, I don't. I have not thought about it either. Do you have one ready to go, Adam? Another
Well,
fun one?
so there are 2 that I'm thinking of. So one is the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Sure.
I think it's the sort of classic MacGuffin. But then I love in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, they just call it a goober and nobody knows what it, and it's like, we just have to plug this goober into the thing and it's going to shut down the reactor. And they just keep calling it a goober over and over again, which I think is great.
Does a MacGuffin have to be something you're looking for, or can it just be a kind of distraction plot thing?
I think I always think of it as the object that both sides of the
Are trying to get.
are trying to get. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say if we allowed a more expansive definition, then the top in Inception would maybe be a MacGuffin, because it's this sort of thing which is the audience is thinking that's gonna anchor you to reality, but then it ends before. So it kind of ends, it's a similar thing of being like tantalizing a kind of is this important, and then letting it go.
Right,
I mean,
right. Or you think it's going to give you all the answers.
now that
and
I think about it, actually,
What's the like doomsday device in Tenet is another good one.
the algorithm. That's a good point.
Yeah.
The algorithm. Yeah, I feel like.
Oh yeah, the algorithm. Don't ask questions about how that thing works.
I think
They're
it doesn't. It literally doesn't matter how it works.
I think you're right though, that because all this stuff we've been saying about Hitchcock and like the don't ask questions, it totally applies to Nolan, and I had Nolan on my mind when I was thinking through that, actually.
Yes,
and I think that
we've had
that
lots of friends who are like, "Well, how come light doesn't invert?" You're like,
"It doesn't matter.
Don't worry so much about the physics of inversion."
Yeah,
he explains the parts that he needs to explain, and then go with it.
Yeah, just feel it. But I do think Nolan cites the various Bond movies as a lot of his inspirations, especially for Inception and some of Tenet. But I actually think that Hitchcock is there's a clear through line, just because of the stuff we've been been talking about.
Well, what I think so, the Ian Fleming books had been out at this time, but they hadn't yet done the first.
Yeah, they
James
called this
Bond.
the first James Bond movie.
Right.
I mean, in some way, it had like dubbed that because
Yeah.
it sort of preceded them.
Yep.
It has all the DNA of a.
It has all the DNA. I think
Bond movie.
Where and I love those early Bond movies. Where I think North by Northwest succeeds in a way that the early Bond movies don't is that none of the characters in North by Northwest are disposable. Like they all matter to the story that's being told, and there's nobody on screen who is just there because he or she just sort of kind of adds to the glamour of the movie. It's all there kind of to serve that sort of menacing thriller mood.
Yeah.
There's less sort of the like glamorous travelogue stuff.
Yeah, totally. And to that point, I want to talk about the James Mason and Martin Landau characters, because when Landau first shows up, I mean, he could just be the henchman guy who's totally disposable. But I mean, Adam, I think you want to maybe say something about this, but there's like a weird relationship going on between them. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, yeah. So Landau is playing this character Leonard as if he is in love with Van Damme, and it's very, very subtle until the very end of the movie when Leonard says is telling Van Damme that he's got this hunch about Eve being a double agent, and he says, "Call it my women's intuition," and that sort of signals kind of that there's a little bit something homoerotic going on. Landau has said in interviews that he was worried that it was going to end his career, because this was 1959 and the puritanical sort of age that they were in. The fact that they kind of got away with that, I think, is really, really interesting and kind of adds another cool layer to this movie.
I think it totally does, because you come into the movie thinking at that, I don't know, let's say we're 2/3 through the movie and you think, there's a love triangle in this movie. It's Roger, Eve, and James Mason's character, Philip Van Damme. That's the love triangle. And then you realize, no, that's not the love triangle. The love triangle is Eve, Philip Van Damme, and Leonard, his henchman. Or at least there are two love triangles happening simultaneously. And
it's a love rhombus.
Or parallelogram.
I'm not sure.
But yeah, so I think it just deepens everything, because now the characters seem to, I don't know, what happens to one matters to what happens to the other. And what I think is kind of cool about that is that you think you've been following Roger this whole time because he's our viewpoint character. But then when you get to the end scene, which takes place in the cool Frank Lloyd Wright house, you realize like he's actually just like stumbled into people's lives. Like people have been living their lives. They've had whole long relationships. and it's all off screen, but you get the sense that like, yeah, these people have a history with one another, and he's an interloper here, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of just like messing around with something that they've had, and maybe it's not perfect, but they've got something going. I mean, it's obviously not perfect. She's a spy and so on, but he's intruding weirdly into their affairs.
Maybe they can have their love story in jail afterwards. Do they go? Do they die?
I think they die.
Oh, bummer.
Leonard
falls.
dies.
Yeah.
Leonard dies.
Yeah.
Oh, sad. Okay, I
Yeah.
couldn't remember. I
Well.
got kind of sleepy at the end again. But I'm sorry. I get sleepy at every movie. It's not personal to North by Northwest. But because they have like a mutual love. Because doesn't Van Damme say like, how do you say goodbye to your arm when they're having to say goodbye to one another because I guess they're leaving Leonard behind. How do you say goodbye to your arm? Oh.
Best buds. Best buds. Because you don't realize too that Leonard is the more important one because it's the other guy. I don't even know who that guy is. The other bodyguard who is the main agitator. Because he's the one,
gardener.
The gardener guy. He like picks him up and everything.
Yeah.
He does like a very cool knife throw in the UN.
Oh my god, dude! That knife probably had some sort of poison in it. Because I was like, what? A knife in the back is not gonna kill. It's just not gonna kill
Not
someone
instantaneously. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even.
But it's a cool shot.
Doesn't matter. Who's asking questions? He's dead. The dude was killed by a knife in the back. It must have gone straight through his heart. It's incredible. Yeah, it was a good knife throw.
Well, and there are at the beginning of the film, there's Leonard, and then there are two henchmen, and then inexplicably one of the other henchmen disappears.
Yeah. And then it's just the guard.
Again, it doesn't really matter, but it's I think you're supposed to understand that the other henchman was the guy flying the plane, and then when the plane crashes, we're down a henchman. Yeah.
Oh man, Van Damme's got a lot of gear. He's got a cool Mount Rushmore chill out palace. He's got a couple planes because he's got the crop duster plane, and he's got the plane that's taking them to wherever the fuck they're going. Where are they going?
One's for assassination, one's for escape.
Where are they going, by the way?
I assume Russia.
You're...
I assume they're giving the microfilm to the commies.
I see. So they're headed. Yeah. Okay. So they're heading west then, because they're in North Dakota or South Dakota.
Are you still trying to figure out the title North by Northwest? Doesn't matter.
Let me ask you guys this. Did you read up about the title?
Yeah, a little bit. It was all very confusing to me.
Yeah.
Every time I've read it, they were just like, this is the best sounding title.
Yeah, it was like a working title. But I actually, there are various moments in the film where they show prominently the Northwest airline, right? Mm-hmm. And now Hitchcock had said, so I initially thought, okay, go north by the Northwest Airlines. That makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they're not traveling north in this movie. I mean, I guess New York, maybe, I don't know, is south of, I don't know where, like Chicago or South Dakota, whatever. But I think the film was supposed to end in Alaska, but whatever, they didn't make it there. But that makes sense to me. But then apparently they're on a compass. There's Northwest by north. Yeah. That's like a direction on the compass. Mm-hmm. But there is no North by Northwest. And I guess like Hitchcock was just sort of like, you thought it was funny to make
a MacGuffin title.
Yeah.
You're going for the feeling.
Yeah.
And it's a mysterious, intriguing title.
Yeah.
That ultimately doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Let me ask one more last thing about MacGuffins. Because I think this film should just be called MacGuffin. Or inexplicable elements, let's say. Mount Rushmore. So he's got a penthouse on top of Mount Rushmore. First of all, that seems impossible because it's a national park. So it's federal land. That doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
But second of all,
it's cool as hell though.
Yeah, why? Like, is there some significance to Mount Rushmore? Right? Like, why set it on top of Mount Rushmore?
I have a reason that Hitchcock said, which is that he just thought it would look cool. And he had this idea of like having a chase scene on Mount Rushmore for many years. Totally. And then was like, hey, writer, put this in. But
no, it feels like this whole movie was that, right? Yes. It was like, I got a cool idea. Chase scene on Mount Rushmore. Here's another cool idea. Hold on, wait. Are you waiting for it? Crop duster attack scene.
Yeah.
I got another cool idea. Start the movie with a dude who doesn't know what the hell's going on. Like this whole movie is just like napkin notes of like this would be pretty cool.
And set pieces.
Yeah.
Right? Now, like I feel like we're like getting into modern blockbuster times where he's just like, we got to build our movie around these like really cool visuals and action set pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, in that sense, you might think it doesn't mean any much at all, except for that he liked the visual of it. But I do think like we're in a spy Cold War movie and we're using American iconography here. So there's got to be there's like stuff to glean from this, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mount Rushmore is like kind of the ultimate jingoistic thing, right? Let's take this beautiful natural thing and just like just put some faces of people that we as Americans think are important. We're gonna put that there. It doesn't matter whose native land this is. None of that matters. So there's this sort of symbol of American excess, and the villain of this movie stealing secrets essentially from this the greatest nation on earth and escaping from right on top of this monument, I think is really interesting.
I think it's also interesting that Hitchcock had the idea of him being in Jefferson's nose. That was like a big part of it, was that he would like the hero would be trapped in Jefferson's nose. And somehow like he would like sneeze in the nose. And there was like this joke he had in his head. But I think that really is like the thing is like Hitchcock is like, he has that playful mindset of like, this is life and death, but it's also kind of jokey and kind of hokey and silly, right? We're playing up the kitschiness of Mount Rushmore, which is a fucking giant mountain with a bunch of heads carved into it. Like, what's kitschier than that? And so we're gonna sort of subvert the grandeur of it by the alleged grandeur of it. I don't know. People probably. Let's go see it someday. I don't know, but by sticking someone's in the nostril, and having it be, I don't know.
I think
gross.
the subversiveness of that is. I mean, that's probably his instinct for why he wants to have a bunch of people crawling all over our faces and our American icons. Like he's this movie, like he's just doing everything he can to make this movie as sexual as possible, but just dodging the code, the code, and he's trying to push every boundary that any studio or film convention puts on him. And like making fun of our American patriotism is definitely, I think, one thing that he'd love to just sort of like tease apart a little bit, just for fun, just because he likes to push buttons.
He's a rascal, that one.
He is a rascal.
He's a little rascal. And
I also read, speaking of his rascalness, that like he the national parks were very not happy about they were like not happy about the idea of him filming there at all, and then they had to he agreed there'd be no violence that took place on the Rushmore grounds, but then he ended up being like, well, it didn't happen on Mount Rushmore because I built another Mount Rushmore, so it just happened over there.
He's playing.
It's a lot of like people almost pushing each other but then slipping. Like it's there's not a whole lot of actual fighting that goes on in that scene. It's a lot of climbing and falling.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does sort of like remind me of like a kid being like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. Like this hand hovering like 1 centimeter off of your face. Like he's like, no. I didn't do any violence on Mount Rushmore. I did the violence on my set.
Do you guys have I mean, we've talked about a lot of scenes, but is there one that stands out as your favorite?
So there's one we haven't talked a ton about yet, which is the first meeting between Van Damme and Thornhill, where it's sort of James Mason's first scene in the movie. The two of them are kind of circling each other in the library, and the whole scene is sort of talking in metaphor, like, and this kind of is a through line in the movie. Like Van Damme keeps referring to Thornhill as an actor, and is commenting on his performance and his technique, and it's just incredibly well constructed movie making, and then also really good writing and fantastic performances. It's not one of the it's not the crop duster scene, but that scene to me I think is really, really great.
Did you call me Kaplan?
I know you're a man of many names, but I'm perfectly willing to accept your current choice.
Current choice? My name is Thornhill. Roger Thornhill. There's never been anything else.
Of course.
So obviously your friends picked up the wrong package when they bundled me out here in the car.
Do sit down, Mr. Kaplan.
I told you I'm not Kaplan, whoever he is.
Excuse me.
Yes?
The guests are here, dear.
Look after them. I'll be with you in a few minutes.
I like the reprise to that scene too, where you see the woman who had previously played the wife, or had played the wife, and I guess maybe she's the gardener's wife. They say the only people living there are the gardener and his wife, but she's some part of Van Damme's crew. But she
Yeah.
comes in and pretends to be the lady of the house, and she, when the mother is there, 2 police officers, and she's like, "Oh, did you steal Laura's Mercedes?" She borrowed Laura's Mercedes. I wanted to give her an Oscar for that
Oh,
moment.
it's so good. And it's so good too because you think, as a viewer, you're thinking, they've been keeping me in the dark for 15 minutes, 20 minutes now. Now he's going to nail him, right?
Yeah,
He's marching him back into the
He's
house.
like-
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
every
then-
moment he's like, this liquor cabinet, which is full of oh no, it's a lot of bucks. You know?
Mr. Thornhill has told us that he was brought to this house against his will last night and forcibly intoxicated by some friends of your husband's, then set out on the road. Do you know anything about this?
Well, now, Captain, Roger was a bit tipsy when he arrived here by cab for dinner.
She's lying.
And I'm afraid he became even worse as the evening wore on. Finally, he told us he had to go home to sleep it off. Oh, I knew I should have served dinner earlier.
What a performance.
It's also it's so, that whole sequence is so great because all of the people around him don't believe him. It's funny and it's entertaining, and it's also unsettling because you're left with this question like, oh, maybe actually what's going on is Cary Grant's character is insane, and is in the middle of a breakdown or something like that. And then obviously the movie goes in a different direction, but all of these possibilities are open the way that first act is constructed.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like filmic gaslighting. And I think that's been used a lot. That kind of technique has been used a lot as a kind of narrative twist device in movies like Beautiful Mind or whatever, when you're like, oh, that character didn't exist or whatever, or these people turn out to be actors in some elaborate play for this person's life. And I love that experience. Some of my favorite first time film experiences are those where you it's like the bottom drops out and you're at the roller coaster and you're like, what? Dun dun dun, the gopher turns around. But those are the little gopher guy. What is he? Dramatic gopher. Wow. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so that guy, and but that's how I feel in these movies. Like when I saw Beautiful Mind's not a great movie, but when I saw it in theaters,
Sure.
I was at the age where I was like, oh, I'd never seen anything like that. And that kind of thing is cool. That kind of like twist thing that like really throws you for a loop. And it's that same feeling here when it's not really a twist, but it's just like you can't, like, you're not sure what to believe. And you're kind of in
Shutter
this
Island,
moment
I
of
think, is another
Shutter Island,
another movie like that. Yeah, where it's it's I don't think it is on anyone's top 5 Scorsese movie list. Maybe it is, but
I think some people really like it.
It's a really good, similarly kind of pulpy, both exciting externally, but then internally kind of all over the place in a good way. Thrill ride.
Love it. I love that stuff. It just makes me feel like, man, movies are the best. Because I think that's really the thesis of this episode, right? Is that Hitchcock loved movies, partly because he had that prankster vibe. He liked to play the audience like a violin, a lot like Tarantino always says, play the audience like a violin. It's the same kind of thing. Hitchcock loves, I imagine he would love to watch his movies with an audience to like hear the gasps and everything. And that's something very special. And I think we're here because it's Cows in the Field. We celebrate movies and we love them. Adam, do you have any last thoughts?
We talked a little bit about Saul Bass. I think Saul Bass's titles in this movie are really, really special. He visually sort of captures the thrilling excitement of this movie in like 3 minutes, and just with lines and words on the side of the building, along with the score by Bernard Herrmann, which is classic. Saul Bass kind of similarly invents the language of title sequence, and as it turns out, has created logos for just about every corporate entity that was around in the 60s and is still around today. So
That's wild. Do you know what his like more
Yeah.
recent ones were? Like what?
So he did Goodfellas and Casino.
Okay.
He also did Vertigo. He did Psycho.
Sure.
The opening title sequence of his that I really like from that era as well is West Side Story, which is really, really beautiful. He also did the closing credits for that movie, which is the actors' names are written in chalk on a graffitied wall, and the camera just kind of pans and moves along
cool,
rather than sort of going up and down.
I mean, I guess we've been doing this ever since there've been typesetting, but still, like now they're moving and everything, and that's this whole exciting thing that Bass was the master. He was the Bass master. Is it Bass or is it Bass? I always wonder about that. You know how it's Lance Bass? I used to call him Lance Bass. Because it's bass when you talk about the bass clef.
Yeah.
Laura's looking at me.
One other North by Northwest thing is just the very, very silly last shot of this movie.
Sure. We got to talk about the train, don't we?
A train going into a tunnel.
What I was asking Laura, I was like,
he's like, what it means.
What's the point of the train going in the tunnel? I wasn't sure about that because I was assuming before that happened. I thought, well, they kiss and then they just go to sleep. But then after I saw that, for some reason I was convinced that they had sex, but I don't know why.
So strange how that happens.
Well, now they're married, so it's okay.
That's right. They got because Van Damme married them before he fell off the Lincoln's nose. Because Van Damme was like, "Don't let me fall. I'm actually an ordained minister." And then,
I had read that the censors actually made them put in that line. Over the final shot, like, come here, Mrs. Thornhill, like just to make it okay.
But hold on.
But then that would imply they actually understood the last shot.
Yeah, hold on.
Hold
the corn. Are we? Do you guys really believe they're married? Because that could just be like
I thought he just mean my future.
Yeah,
Mrs.
exactly. I thought it just mean it's just like a thing like you say like as like a now we're gonna have sex kind of thing and like
that's your main thing, right?
Yeah.
Come along, Mrs.
Thornhill. No, I say Mrs. Thornhill.
Mrs. Thornhill.
And then but they didn't get married like overnight. We're imagining this is the next. They're taking the train back to New York, right?
Yeah. No. I think they were just by the promise of marriage that made the censors feel better. I don't know if that story is true, if that's completely apocryphal.
Or the professor went online and was able to get ordained by the Universal Life Church.
Yep.
And they had to wait a day. And then they just got married before they went back.
Yeah.
They're probably set up for that at Mount Rushmore, right? Like, I don't know if it's like Vegas, where you can just get married at any time of day at 3 a.m.
Yeah, in Lincoln's nostril.
That's right.
That's where I'm going to get married. By the way, so I'm going to renew our vows in Lincoln's armpit. Be like, man, did they have to put the hair here in Lincoln? I mean, that's super anatomically correct, but it could have just been a smooth armpit instead. It's all like, it's like gray too. I'm like, man, this is crazy.
Stop.
Anyway, so what do you think about the last shot, Adam? Sorry.
I just love, like, it is kind of the ultimate prank.
Yeah.
It's also like, it feels to me, you watch a bunch of Hitchcock movies, it feels to me like he either didn't know how to end movies or just didn't care.
Yeah.
Like he just wrote up to, they just kind of wrote up to where they thought was interesting. And then they were like, okay, well, we actually have to end this movie now. Again, like Vertigo ends with the female lead of the movie getting startled and falling to her death. And then it's just like the end.
Yeah, that's a great ending.
It's wild. And I don't know. I think just Hitchcock kind of being the troll prankster that he was like, hey, good enough. I think this is funny. This is how we're going to end this crazy movie.
This movie, if you compare them to the one, to Vertigo the year before and then Psycho the year after, or 2 years after, anyways, right after, is this movie's way more sexually charged, than those two movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does kind of fit. It's fitting of the most sort of sexed up of that kind of run that he's gonna have some vagina trains, or what were they? Sorry, maybe I don't know.
That was I mean, I think the train's
the penis. Sorry, the train is a penis. I'm sorry.
But I think it's called the Vagina Express.
That's why I got confused. That's why I got confused.
Come along, Mrs. Thornhill.
Oh, Roger, this is silly.
I know, but I'm sentimental.
It's a good movie. I mean, I don't know.
Where is it for you in terms of, because you're not
okay. So for a long time, I sort of adamantly disliked Hitchcock, but that was just me being stupid. And there were certain aesthetic features of films of this time that I found off-putting as someone who, it's just, if I'm gonna put on a film, the aesthetic that I like is not the Hitchcock aesthetic.
Sure.
So but for a long time, that would prevent me from enjoying a movie like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that is no longer the case. So I quite enjoy the film. And I think, like Adam, it's quite high for me. I think it is overshadowed by Vertigo and Psycho, just in terms of like this sort of psychological components of those two films is just way more on the surface and it's way more interesting. And obviously this film is not trying to do that. But I actually think pound for pound, this film is like more fun than those. And so I'm sort of like, I'm torn. I don't really know. It's like, why do I want to watch, what do I want to get out of a Hitchcock film? And if I want some sort of like, weird psychological thing, then I would go with one of those two, or Rear Window, maybe perhaps. But yeah, I don't know. And I there's a lot of his earlier stuff that I haven't seen. So for me, it's very high. I don't know. What about for you, Laura?
I mean, Psycho rules for me always. That movie just still terrifies me. I don't know how he does it. Like, it's so scary.
The last shot of that movie is one of the creepiest things you will ever see.
Yeah.
It is so effective.
Yeah. I watched that movie and I swear for like 6 months afterwards, I only showered with like a complex set of mirrors so that I could see all, I had like a Jack and Jill bathroom. So there's 2 doors I had to keep my eye on. Oh my God. I was like, or my sister and I would just like take turns like hanging out with the other one while the other one showered, like talking the whole time just to make sure that like somebody was there. I was so scared.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like real. That movie is like deep in my psyche. Yeah, I think for me, just like, similar to you in that, like, my first pass at Hitchcock was a more superficial one. I think I was more drawn to Hitchcock when I was in high school because I loved murder mysteries. And so I was more into like some of the earlier stuff, the macabre stuff, the black and white murder mystery stuff. And so I kind of was like, North by Northwest, that's an action one. I'm not as into that one. It's in color. It's not, it's not the aesthetic that I prefer from Hitchcock. I also like didn't understand all of the sex subtext and the like Freudian stuff that was happening when I was watching it in high school. Like, I'm now like rediscovering Hitchcock movies with like a lot more nuance. And it's totally rejiggering, my rankings. So yeah, I think, North by Northwest, one that I had kind of like set aside before, is now way high. It's a feat. And like a real blockbuster, I'm just thinking about like, Hitchcock. I mean, obviously he's prolific and he's done a lot of different kinds of movies and he's really audacious with his camera work. But I mean, in terms of like number of locations, action scenes, the fact that he was stitching together all the Rushmore stuff, some of it's on site, some of it's painted backgrounds, some of it's actually at the park. Like, it's an impressive movie, just craft wise.
I will say whoever owns MGM now needs to get around to releasing a 4K of this movie, because it was filmed in VistaVision and I want to see this shit in 4K. So get that shit together, MGM or whoever owns you.
Amazon, right?
Is it Amazon
I think
now?
so.
Come
I think
on.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say I saw this movie on a big screen a few years ago. Like Turner
Nice.
Classic Movies like released a bunch of these back to theaters.
Nice.
One day only kind of thing, and just seeing all of this on a 50-foot screen is really great.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you very much for being here, Adam.
Yeah,
and
of course.
for suggesting Hitchcock.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this was so fun. The movie really holds up.
Totally. For listeners, we will be back in 2 weeks with Carly Severn for Closer. So we're gonna do Closer, the Natalie Portman, Jude Law,
Clive Owen, Julia Roberts,
and Julia Roberts 4-way movie. So
we're
doing
the
that.
sexy vibes going.
Yeah. We are at CowsPod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.wordpress.com, and you can buy a shirt with a cow on it at cowspod.threadless.com. So check us out there. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you so desire. And thank you very much for listening. We'll see you guys then. Bye.